happiness in the corporate world didn't even exist. This is long before we had data, any research, any Harvard studies that validated the fact that happy employees tend to be more. First of all, they're physically healthier. Let's start with that, which means greater retention, less turnover. That happy employees are more innovative. They're better teammates. They lift up their teammates. They're more productive, and in the end, that all impacts the bottom line, which is profitability for an enterprise and a company. When I used to say stuff like that, because my background before that, I was a clinical psychologist in private practice. People in the corporate world would say, Dr. Elia, you don't know what you're talking about. I pay these people to work. Now they don't need happiness. They just need to get they just need to get to work. So I was like a lone voice out in the wilderness, kind of. Well, fortunately, over the last 15 years, all the studies have supported what I have been preaching and saying for a long time. And the Happiness Center, I'm in the United States, but my partners were all the way from Australia to Hong Kong to London, and now, of course, bringing happiness and wellness to India. I'm very passionate about happiness and wellness. And as you know, and Rohit, I don't know if you can put up the one slide that I had sent to you about the five most important and pressing issues right now facing organizations across the globe, uh, but also in India specifically, certainly in the United States, are these. And I don't necessarily have to read this for you, but it's fascinating to me that the first and the biggest challenge right now is ensuring the mental and physical well-being of your employees. In the old days, and I mean that before the pandemic, this wouldn't even make the top five, you know. And the second, of course, is to maintain employee morale and engagement and productivity and effectiveness. That always was number one, right? Well, you can't get to number two in today's world the way things are right now if you don't take care of number one. And I think this is a major focus of discussion. And of course, the other challenge, which is unique, is number three. How do you create an ecosystem around work from home? For example, Google has said nobody's coming to work until at least the end of June. And there are many big companies that are telling their employees, stay at home. So how can we create an environment where people can be productive, they can balance their lives, their personal lives and their family lives together with their workplace requirements? And really, how do we adapt to the new normal? And I actually don't even like that term. That's not my term. Everybody talks about the new normal. Really, it's how do you adapt and facilitate and navigate the next normal? I wrote a book just in the middle of the pandemic called Seven Keys to Navigating a Crisis, a practical guide to emotionally dealing with pandemics and other disasters, which specifically addresses that. Because the next normal, as you know, the worldwide cases right now are growing. Every day we're breaking new records. And the world is facing at least four global crises as we speak. Obviously, COVID-19. We have the mental health crisis, meaning where depression, anxiety, and stress is up an astonishing 1,000% and growing. According to the United Nations, there's over 1 billion people with a B suffering from anxiety, stress, and depression. And mind you, these people did not have a pre-existing condition. This is a direct result. Then, of course, you throw in the financial and economic crisis as economies around the world have shut down, where you have hundreds of millions of people unemployed and a couple of billion people either underemployed or basically financially insecure, where they don't really know what next month looks like and how they can pay their bills and support themselves and their families. And then, of course, you have the social, political, and racial, upheaval, certainly here in the United States, but other parts of the world. So the world is in a crisis, and human beings are very resilient. Like we've overcome so many things before, and like we're still standing. Like Elton John's famous song was, "I'm still standing." We're all still standing. If we're watching this, we're still alive. Human beings are very resilient. They can handle one or two crises at once. They can't really handle four or five. And I'm not even talking about the personal crisis, like a relationship issue or a sick child or having to take care of an elderly parent or somebody that has cancer or diabetes or heart disease or other stuff. I'm not even including those in these four major crises. So how can we be happy in the midst of this? The Happiness Center has programs for organizations, the first and foremost is something that I created called work-life happiness. Everybody talks about work-life balance, which to me is elusive. There's never a true work-life balance. But can there be work-life happiness? Absolutely, because happiness is a choice, but it takes work. We have another program, of course, how to successfully navigate any crisis. And here are the 7 keys. And finally, what we call, create your best year yet, either for your team, for your division, for the entire company, or even for on an individual basis. So these are some of the things. We spread happiness in the United States and Europe. We have Hong Kong and Australia, and really with the help with BI, and I'm here to bring happiness to India. Like I said, I'm very passionate about it, and it takes a lot of work, and we'll talk about more of the specifics. So I want to give my time now to who's next. Mishra, are you next? I think you might be next. So this
Yes,
is
thanks.
just an opening statement. We'll have a roundtable discussion, but love from America. We're struggling big time here in America. I know India has, a lot of cases too. The only positive news about this pandemic is that the death rate has gone down, which is really good. And India is doing great when it comes to that. But in other parts of the world, the numbers continue to grow. And to quote from a TV show called Game of Thrones, winter is coming. And winter is coming, and winter is going to be tough. We have another 6 months coming in that things are going to get worse. And I'm an optimist, like I'm the happy guy, right? But we also have to be realistic. So how can we navigate through this storm while maintaining our happiness and wellness? The time is now yours, Mishra. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Elia, and very happy to be here. Firstly, thank you, BI, for having me on this forum, and also for, bringing this discussion to us. So, thank you. About myself, Dr. Elia already introduced me. I'm currently working with PepsiCo as an HR business partner, and I think this whole topic of happiness, as well as employee experience, if I just take it one level above, is very, very critical. For all of us HR practitioners. But before I get to what I want to say, for all of us from India, we're celebrating the festival of the Dussehra today. So very, very happy Dussehra to all of you. And also, I know that this is generally, I mean, the time which is the beginning of the festive season. So, good luck and best wishes for this festive season. I know it's going to be tougher than every other year, but hopefully we'll all manage to be happy and have a bit of fun in this time of the year. Okay, so heading straight into the topic, and personally, I believe that employee experience, is not about specific initiatives or topics that you discuss with your employees or things that you do for them. It is actually a culmination of the entire journey that an employee has with you as an organization, starting from the point he or she joins you and to the time they're working with you. So it is extremely critical that we kind of analyze, look at each of those points of interaction carefully, and not just look at them through the lens of typical HR, the way we look at them in terms of initiatives. And that brings me to my next thought, and something that's very close to my heart, which is that as soon as we think of employee experience or making our employees happier, let's not think in terms of processes that we as HR people can roll out to them, or processes that we can think of. I think the whole topic in my mind is much more human than it is process or just initiative driven. So you have to think beyond the HR processes or typical management processes that we think of, and think of the entire experience that you're giving the person, and make it much more human and understanding, and also as flexible as required from an employee perspective. And I am saying this, and don't be surprised, because I do work for a multinational organization where, as far as possible, you would like to have, in terms of policies, processes, initiatives, some kind of standardization across geographies, yes. However, at the same time, you would still want to have some amount of human flexibility to be able to take care of what your employees truly want. Or if a certain employee is reaching out to you, can I actually help the person to achieve what he or she is looking for? So I think that's really critical, and in my mind, something that we should always think about when we think about employee experience, and specifically in the context of happiness that we are speaking about today. The other thing that, just from an introduction perspective that I do want to touch upon, and Dr. Also spoke about it before me, is around why is it important now to speak about some of these things. And, frankly, Dr. Elia is absolutely right. I mean, even 15 years back when he started this, it was it was as critical, but I think as organizations probably we were not paying that much attention to it, and also looking at it in a much more process or initiative perspective. But today, I think, the few points that I can think about and why this becomes much more critical. And frankly, I mean, we've already spoken about COVID right at the beginning, so I'm not even going to talk about the pandemic specifically. Even apart from the pandemic, but accelerated by the pandemic, there are trends that are there, out there for us, and which is what makes this whole thing about happiness as well as employee experience very, very critical. The first one of it is employee choices. Just the number of choices that are available for people is a lot these days compared to what it was in the past. And mind you, today I think our employees don't just have choices in terms of where they're located. They have choices around the globe. I am based in India, but I do a job which is covering this entire sector and geographies which are far beyond my own geography. So I do have a choice, where I can pick an organization which takes much more care of me than any other. So employee choices is very critical, much more than it was before. Secondly, the diversity angle at the workplace has exploded. I know that gender diversity, is something that we've been speaking about forever. But I think apart from gender diversity, if you just look at workforce diversity, if you look at generations of the workplace and, all of those working together, gender, of course, if you look at nationalities, backgrounds of people, and all of them having strong point of views to express, to want to express, and for us as organizations, the responsibility to give them those platforms to be able to express themselves and appreciate, the difference that they bring to the workplace, is something that makes that experience or the happiness quotient very, very important, because you're wanting to cater to all these people who are working together. Sorry. The third one that I do want to talk about is around digitization and technology. I think now more than ever before, you have so much technology coming into the workplace. Anything and everything that can be automated will be automated in the future. And what does that mean? That means that the jobs that are left with organizations are fewer, and organizations are becoming far more focused in terms of doing jobs that are truly their competitive advantage and jobs that cannot be automated, in which case this set of employees who are doing those jobs for you become very, very critical, and to take care of their happiness and well-being is a big responsibility that you have as organizations. And then finally, the last thought that I had on this topic, on why this is important at this stage, is around this whole virtual working. And again, Dr. Elia touched upon it as well, which is that this virtual working will probably reduce in the future as the pandemic kind of scales down. Having said that, we do have to find a new normal. I don't think that in the future we will either be completely at the completely the old way, where everybody was going to offices, and it won't be obviously how we are now, which
Yes.
is almost everybody is working from home. It will be some sort of a balance, and organizations will take those calls. So to that extent, creating the same experience for an employee, whether or not he or she is working in your environment, which was an environment that you could control, which was an environment that you could design for a certain employee experience or happiness, is now the person's home. So hence this topic becomes extremely critical. So those would be my opening thoughts on the topic. Thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it on to Monica, I think. So Monica, over to
No,
you.
just yeah, no. I'm let me add. First of all, you speak my language. I just want to hug you. I mean, this is like this exactly right. The thing about the term human resources, HR, yes, processes and resources are important, but it's the human element that really will make the difference between your organization and your competitor. And that truly begins from onboarding, like from the very first day when a new employee has an experience. What is their experience that very first day? In other words, when they go home and their spouse says, "How was work, honey? How was your first day?" What would they say to their family that loves them? Well, I don't know. They gave me their computer and they told me not go work in the corner. Or was it, man, I feel so welcomed. I feel like I'm part of a family. I feel like I'm so excited. I can't wait to go to work tomorrow again. That's because you only have one chance to make a good first impression, as you know. And we work with organizations, HR organizations, throughout the world, one of the things that we teach is what we like to call stay interviews. Now, most people have exit interviews. And what are exit interviews? When somebody leaves your company, you ask him, why are you leaving? Because my manager
Yeah.
was a jerk. That's why I'm leaving. Because I didn't like my man, right? Usually people rarely leave companies, they leave other people who they didn't get along with or felt disrespected or underappreciated or not appreciated at all. So we like to do what we call stay interviews. And stay interviews are basically at the end of the first week, we actually have an interview with a very person that got onboarded a week ago. And we ask them a couple of questions. What's been your experience this first week? Have the things that we talked about during onboarding come to fruition? Is there anything we can do better? Do you have any questions that we can direct you to the right person to answer, or perhaps us as HR, right? And then we do this again at the end of the month. What's your experience for the first month? What this does subconsciously and psychologically to the employee is this. You start planting the seeds that my company or my manager or my boss actually truly cares about me. In the way that we're working right now, a lot of us remotely, right? It's and you're right. This isn't going to be the when this pandemic actually slows down. It's not going to go back to the way it was before completely, but it's not going to stay the same either, where everybody's working remotely. But for right now, since we can't, and I don't like the term social distancing, I think that's a big mistake. Somebody came up with it early on and caught on. We're talking about physical distancing. We need social connection more now than ever. So when you talk to an employee
Agree.
remotely, if you have people all over the, whether it's in the Middle East or in Asia or whatever, when you ask them, don't say, how are you doing? Lean into the camera like, how are you really doing? I'm closing the door. This is between you and I. How's your family? How are your kids? How's your spouse? Do you need anything? Like we have to up our emotional intelligence as leaders in so people can feel it through the camera, through the lenses that, you know what, I know we're not physically there at the office together, but she truly cares about me. Like, and so we have to be much more vulnerable, much more human, much more open as leaders ourselves. And it's okay to even say, you know what, I'm kind of struggling too. I kind of miss being in the office and being around other people. I can't wait for all of us to be together again. So what can I do to help you, if anything, to make your job easier while you continue to work from home? We must have those conversations now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
okay. Um, Rahul, you're next. Go.
Yeah. So just to give a quick introduction, my name is Rahul Gautam. I head HR for PI Industries, which is a fine chemicals company. It has about 2,000 people. And the company is it's a promoter-led company. I've worked in multinationals before, but I'm working in a promoter-led company. So there is a lot of old school thinking also, which is there that, this whole battling with manufacturing companies cannot work from home, and plants need to be running at 100% capacity. And those are the kind of challenges that from a contextual perspective that we are doing. I also am a happiness teacher with the art of living. I teach these courses, so I've been a meditation practitioner for the last 20 years, and I feel that that was one of the reasons why I don't participate in webinars, but this was really an exciting topic, so I thought I should come here. Uh, to me, I'll put my thoughts in two ways. One is uh, what's the challenge that we are facing, and I'm talking about HR because fundamentally I've started hating this word called resource, human resource.
Yeah.
You know, at some level, this is not a resource. We are really dealing, and I like what Bhavya said, which is, the human side of the HR. Um, the big challenges that we as facing is because today when I made my HR strategy, it is completely different from the way I'd been making my strategy in the last few years. I used to make a cerebral strategy around, the way I want to run talent acquisition, blah, 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 blah. And those things are important today. But at the same time, when I'm seeing where am I investing a lot of my time, where is my management expecting stuff, 30, almost one third of my time is the way we are dealing with this, or maybe half of the time is the way on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, we are dealing with this change of scenario that keeps hitting us. So this whole aspect of being able to balance the business need and the human need, HR is playing a far more delicate role now, because the business need is also got amplified with companies really struggling to conserve cash, to make profits, sometimes really not having the sales going. And at the same time, the employees feeling far more demoralized, demotivated, low on energy. How do you, this amplified difference which has got created? And HR is right at the center of it, because both the management tries to push the pressure on HR and the employees also do that. The second piece which I've seen is HR needs to be working far more harder. In fact, all management teams are working far more harder today, and we really need to rethink in the way we are actually designing stuff. And I'll be very, very basic here. I'm not going to talk any airy-fairy stuff. Basic stuff around the way we are making our policies today for people. Basic stuff around the way we are managing manpower budgets, because on the pressure, you will have the pressure to let go of people, reduce the salary cost, and then you need to work harder to be able to creatively create ways. And which is something that we did, for example, with the board, I had almost 10 rounds of meetings where, you're going back and forth to look at ways where the job cut does not happen and the salary cut does not happen and people get paid on time. So point I'm trying to say is HR needs to keep working much harder. Management teams need to work much harder. Similarly, the whole thing around connection, this has taken a far, while we are completely on the computer, but the connection need is far higher today. Yes. There is far more isolation. There is far more stress. There is always that anxiety. Am I doing enough? Is my boss really feeling, am I doing work right? Or that whole job security syndrome that people get into. Oh, I need to show that I'm working. And since you're not physically there, it creates a tremendous amount of stress. And we as a function need to be able to deal with that. Then this whole thing around the COVID. In a 2,000 people company, 150 people got affected by COVID. Wow. We had 3 casualties. Okay. And because we kind of went ahead and there was this pressure to start the plant, and we did start the plant, but immediately we got back on our feet and made sure that there were good hospital tie-ups that happened. And today we are at a situation where almost out of those 130 people, 120 people have got cured and they have come out, either through a home quarantine method or a hospital. The point that I'm trying to say is HR needs to really get on the ground right now. This is not a time where, we are just, sitting in a thing and making those policies that we used to make earlier. If you ask any employee, what do you expect out of your HR function today? What are they fundamentally saying? Please, boss, give my salary on time, give my increments on time, make sure that, I'm safe, my job is safe, and don't push me, to come to office and, take care of my safety. If something happens to me, yes, give me a little hospitalization benefit. So we're really talking of the base of the Maslow's hierarchy right now, which is where people's expectations of HR are. And that's where I would say that, we kind of did a fairly good job in terms of doing, we have 3 different kinds of businesses which are absolutely chalk and cheese. One is a sales and distribution setup where all our field employees are out there, all over India, spread. Okay. And then we have a manufacturing setup where everything is centralized. We had to make sure that every possible small territory had a hospital tie-up and people would get that attention and care. Even in a traditional setup, the way you look at medical insurance, medical policies, those kind of things which were there, we made sure that we got good policies in place and, we gave that safety to the people. The third piece challenge is about handling self. I feel that the management, as part of management teams, the tempers are running high. The stress levels are very high. The tendency to make a chota thing into a big thing and make sure, kind of these things as HR, you need to be the real shock absorber at this point in time. And before happiness, I would say, a very strong sense of centeredness and balance, which needs to be there in the HR people. and in the leadership teams extremely, extremely important. So how are you nursing yourself on a daily basis? Because the tendency for things to just go out of control over small things is much higher today than what it was about a year back. So this is the kind of challenges and the play that we have. And as I talked about, we kind of, first thing that we started instilling was, how do we build this into a more family unit? One of the advantages of a promoter-led setup is you can create the sense of family and feeling. If there's one person not well, we'll kind of make sure that we create a support structure around it. So we did that. Second is on the safety and the health. I talked about the medical insurance, hospital tie-ups. HR had to go where there were people who were infected or the families were infected. We, in fact, went and gave groceries to people. Never in my career, HR has played these kind of roles, but we played these roles because this is what is really important to be done today. If we talk about recognition and communication, far more intense communication needs to happen. Far more regular communication needs to happen. Far more positive vibe giving communication needs to happen. Local heroes who are there on the front lines, battling, trying to get the sales going during a COVID time, make them big heroes. So for the first time in our company, we had a virtual annual day. We never had these virtual events earlier. Again, old school manufacturing, that kind of a thing. And phenomenal feedback. People felt, their families participated, and it was a joy that people experienced. L&D, we had not gone the digital way, and whenever we used to go the digital way, it was more about showing the sexiness of, we are an L&D, we are kind of going digital and all that stuff. But here we actually picked up programs that will help people on the personal side in terms of their well-being, also on the functional side to make sure that they're doing well into their jobs. So fundamentally, I just want to summarize by saying HR has gone into an absolute reset mode, and it is not just a cerebral function, it's the function with the heart. People want care, people want far more empathy, and HR needs to be playing a much bigger shock absorber than it has ever played.
Yes, and thank you for your comments. I couldn't agree more. The organizations, I'm looking at HR and I feel like you're squished, right? You're getting from the C-suite, from the CEOs, the pressure to be profitable, to be productive even in the midst of this pandemic, while at the same time, like you said, you have to practice care for your employees at an unprecedented level. What I'm asking leaders to do is the old model of work hard, hit the numbers, is no longer working. We have to tell our employees the reason why we need to hit the numbers by the end of the month is because I do not want to lay off 25% of my workforce. You are my family. I want to preserve. I don't want to have to let go of it. But if we don't hit those numbers, and not to make it a fear-based environment, I guess is what I'm saying. I totally agree with you. Increased empathy, increased humanity. I love your story about bringing, groceries to families. I think that what a personal touch, right? What a wonderful thing. So yes, the demands on HR leaders have grown exponentially during this pandemic. But on the other hand, and this is the optimist in me coming out, it's a great opportunity to do things better, right? Because I feel like I call the great pandemic like the great pause, like some giant finger from the sky came and paused humanity and allowed us to think clearly, especially in practice and mindfully, what is this world really all about and what is my life all about? The great Greek philosopher Aristotle said happiness is the meaning, the whole meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim to human existence, right? What a statement. Like, this is what we're here to do. So my comment to everybody is, do not procrastinate your happiness. Like, whatever makes you happy, think about it consciously now. So as leaders, what can we do to convey that message to the workforce? It's not an easy thing to do, but it's and as leaders ourselves, we have to start by practicing self-care, which is the first key to navigating a crisis. Self-care. How well do we take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually? Because if we don't practice that, we can't tell other people, well, here, do this. If we have to walk the talk is what I'm saying. So thank you for your comments. Monica, you're next. We're excited to hear you. So the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Dr. Elia. I'm excited to speak as well. Thank you, Bhavya and Rahul, also for your views. I agree with most of them and have experienced them. I think before I begin, I have close to 20 years experience now across the globe. I've worked across geographies, worked across industries. And one thing I see that remains common across the world is that human emotions are same everywhere. Somebody sitting in US, India, any part of the world, we are dealing with human beings at the end of the day. And I can't agree with more. It's my first webinar, by the way. I've never attended because the topics never interested me. And when VI Executive Search approached me, I was pleased because I can totally associate with the topic happiness. I promote it, I live by it, and I totally agree with you when you say that happiness is a choice. You can't buy it. It has to come from within, and we can help people derive it from within as HR people when we work. I'm going to go a little on the pandemic a bit. When I moved countries, I'd also moved from India to Dubai, worked there, and then the pandemic hit. They were also struggling with collections in DAMAC Dubai, and there were a lot of struggles both ways, organization-wise, people challenges, and what I saw was, I think the word for me there, and then I came back, of course, I settled in India with a company that gives you full free hand to operate in a manner you want to operate as an HR person. And Dr. Elia, when you said that, my door is open, come talk to me. I think that kind of approach is what people are looking at. Human touch is what we stand for. We should promote the open door policy. I absolutely don't believe in closed door culture or rooms. My door of the room is always open. I go around. I don't think, as Rahul also said, we're not a policy making people anymore. We are people that go around, talk to people, get involved. So I think there was a lot of learning. It was like a reality check for all of us. There were things we'd not done, we'd unlearned, started doing a different way. But I think one thing that remained common for me in the last 6 months of learning and promoting now with people is empathy. I think there's no other way that you can, be an successful HR head, but to give them an employee experience. I think how you talk, walk, create that environment. I mean, be available for them. One of the things I think that people felt very unsettled about were not just the layoffs happening, the salary cuts, but I think people sitting at home and having no communication across. So I think as HR person, one of the things that I believe doing was creating transparency and keeping the communication clear. So people are not in doubt. They're not thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? No, you're telling them what is going to happen next. You're making sure that for the next 2 months agenda or 6 months agenda, they know that the jobs are secured. They're not panicking. They're not having anxiety attacks. In fact, India had this case of, there was this, and I don't know if Dr. Elia would know about it, but Bhavya and Rahul can definitely associate with it, where we had a case of mental illness which came up because a very famous actor passed away, and it shook not just the entire industry, but the entire country, I think. Today also we're struggling to find answers to why that happened. And it brought a lot of awakening, I think, in people, whether it was going back to the minimalistic, it was going back to the basics, it was nurturing the human relations more, than cracking the sales numbers. I think, and that's what as HR people, we had to play like a conduit between the management and people, tell management that we can go slow on numbers. The safety of people is most important for us. And that's what we were promoting at that time, that we are here for you, giving them the comfort that their jobs are secured for the next 6 months. Thankfully, not having to fire people during that time. I'm very happy to be part of the organization called AIPL that stood for its values. Rahul, it's also a promoter-driven organization. And I've been the queen of working with the promoter-driven organizations most of my life. And there are challenges, and we have to be very lucky when we choose an organization which has not laid off a single person in the pandemic. They did have to maybe cut some salaries at the time. There was zero collection. I mean, one had to be fair also, but they repaid it as soon as the 100% office started. Today, they're working in 100% capacity. I go to office every day. My main, I think, outlook as an HR person today is the comfort of the people, the safety, the communication to them, making sure I'm in direct contact with people that were affected, to let them know that we are there for them, you know. And thankfully, this company also promotes a culture of people with longevity. So there have been people who've been working for 17 years, 20 years. It's a great environment to be a part of. So when mental health became, and town halls were not possible, right? We were all spread across different, places in the world. And therefore, having an online platform, I also experienced the first town hall online, where we were addressing people to say that it's a part of life, it's happening. Thankfully, we didn't have any casualties, so we didn't have to talk about a lot of the casualty part of it, but we were very concerned about people falling sick on sites because it's a construction business. The sites were moving after 2 months of lockdown, and there were people who did get affected. Their families got affected, and then we made sure that they're in the right hospitals, getting the right medical care. So I think being available, knowing it all, being in touch constantly, and ensuring that they feel that there is always somebody to take care and looking out for them. That kind of human touch is what personally I'd like to bring in as an HR person. So keeping the communication clear, making sure they're comfortable, and giving them the right employee experience as part of being an HR person is what we thrive on. Today also, we were now coming up with a model where we're going to start the town halls with people. You said it very rightly, and I'm going to use it now, that it's not social distancing, it's the physical distancing that we need to take care of. And on that note, I circulate it back to you, Dr. Elia. More answers from you, I think, on the physical distancing and not social, and how we can leverage from that.
First of all, thank you, Monika. I can feel your passion. I'm all the way in America, but I can feel your passion and excitement. And you have such a big heart. I can see it. I don't know anything about technical stuff, so I'm grateful for, Rohit for fixing everything. But I can read people like an X-ray. That's a gift that I've been given since I was young. And I can read your energy. And thank you for, and to everybody else on the panel, too. You're all passionate about what you're doing. This is the reason why you're welcome, ensuring the physical and mental well-being of our employees is the #1 issue right now. The very first webinar that I did with BI happened to be the very week that I think, is it Sushant Singh Rajput, the actor that
was
passed
the one
away? Yes, that it was that very week we had the first webinar was the week that he passed away. And the mental health crisis is real. And you can think, this young man, so talented, at the peak of his career, like he had at least 20, 30 years in Bollywood. I mean, he could have done anything right in his life. And yet, at least, the suicide hotline here in my country anyway, the numbers are higher than they have ever been, because people are suffering from loneliness.
Yeah.
Don't assume that everyone who works remotely surrounded by a loving family. That's not always true. Some people are alone. Some people don't have that connection. That's why the social distancing, that's why we need to be more connected. We need to make that extra phone call. I'll give you a real example. Back in April, because one of the 7 keys to navigating a crisis is not just practice self-care, which is the first one, but the second one is to listen. To be aware, listen to your intuition, listen to that inner wisdom. Some people say, listen to the spirit, the divinity, I don't care what you call it, but that voice is real. And I got a message that I needed to reach out to a friend of mine. We've been friends for 40 years, who has a Ph.D. She happens to be in Greece, although she was educated in America. And her name came up in my head. Her name is Helen. And I'm like, call her up. So I called, in the middle of the night. She picks up the phone. She goes, why are you calling me? I said, honestly, I don't really know. I just got the feeling that I needed to call you. She goes, well, that's really, and mind you, this is back in April when things were shutting down, right? This is the beginning. She goes, I suffer from asthma. And she has a professor at the major university. She goes, I've been isolated in an apartment by myself for the last 9 days. I haven't talked to or touched another human being. She said to me, have you ever had that happen in your life? And I had to think about it. I said, no, I don't think I've gone 9 days in my life without talking or touching somebody or hugging somebody, because I have to isolate myself for the next 30 days. And he just goes, I'm really lonely. I'm so glad you called. And I made a point. I said, I'm going to call you every week from now on, just to check in with you. You know, I didn't know why I was calling her. So if you get a prompting like that, if somebody's name comes in your head, don't wait. Don't even ask why. Pick up the phone or get on a Zoom call or go visit them if you can do that safely. What's the worst thing that could happen? Why are you calling me? I'm doing fine. That's the worst thing that could happen. But more likely than not, they're going to say, thank you for calling. It really means a lot to me as my HR leader or as my colleague, or even as a direct report, whatever. If you get that reach out to somebody. If people are lonely, do you know that there's such a thing now as a broken heart syndrome?
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking about a broken heart because your girlfriend broke up with your boyfriend. I'm talking about physically your heart. People are suffering from broken heart syndrome because of loneliness and isolation and fear. So, Monika, when you talked about over communicating and showing an increased empathy, you're totally right. There's so much uncertainty. So the more we can communicate and say, okay, you have your job for the next 60 days. You're going to get paid on time. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that we don't control in life. I mean, the federal government, the government makes announcements almost every week, and they're different, like more restrictions, loosening up of the economy, back again wearing masks all the time, that back and forth, back and forth. We're tired, we're fatigued. So we need to help one another. I want to bring our, Miss Mishra, would you pipe in and share your thoughts from everything you've heard so far?
No, I think, that's why I've been quiet, because I agree with, most of what we're speaking about. And, this whole thing about being lonely and reaching out to employees. And I'll give you very, very simple examples. I think just bringing it to the corporate world itself, I think, when you went to office, when you had meetings, or if, say, I was traveling to another city, another country, etc., right? When you had meetings, you would meet people. And normally in every meeting, you have these, breaks in between, you have lunches in the beginning. When you come 5-10 minutes earlier, you chat with people. What has happened with Zoom is, and this has been my personal experience as well, and it's the same when I've discussed it with other leaders also. What has happened is that, look at your calendar, right? It's chock-a-block from morning till evening, probably much more than your regular working hours of, just as an example, say 9 to 6, right? Much more than that, because you're working across time zones, you're not able to meet people, so you're just always connecting online. Now, first is that. Second is that somehow, as soon as you get onto a Zoom call, you have this tendency to be efficient. So, as soon as you get into a meeting, you're like, okay, so what's the agenda today? And you straight away dive into the topic. There is actually no time for interaction, which used to be there earlier. Again, normally in your workday, you would take breaks, which was sane in nature. Once you worked for a couple of hours, you'd have a coffee, you'd chat with people. Now, today, if you have kids, your kids are also studying online in school. If you have a spouse, he or she also may be working, and your breaks may not match at all. So through the week, the way you're working for yourself, right? You're just on these calls, and in each of these calls, you have this tendency to be, like I said, much more efficient, because you're not just logging in to chat with people and say, oh, how are you doing? What did you have for lunch and dinner? Or where did you go shopping? But normally you would do that. And as shallow or lame as it sounds, some of these random conversations actually help you. And it's not just about connecting or talking to people who are really meaningful in your life or who have a lot of things, but just the social setup when you go to office, when you meet people, that itself kind of releases some amount of pressure, tension, and just releases that pressure when you're able to walk around office, talk to people. None of that is happening at all. You're in the same setting morning to night, and look at me, like I have this background at the back, right? The maximum you can do is keep changing your Zoom backgrounds to make you yourself feel like you're nice different locations. So I think it's a very, very important topic, and something that you have to work on for yourself. So if there is a discipline that you yourself want to create or want to encourage your employees to create, you must do that. And by that I mean that if you want to set aside some time every day to say that this is the time when I'm going to focus and work on myself, right? And whatever it means to you, there is no prescription around that. And similarly for your other employees, respect them to be able to do that. Instead of saying that, okay, here are these engagement initiatives that I want to give you, let people do their own thing and try to create whatever it is that helps them be more happy, be more satisfied, plan their lives better. Of course, if they need your assistance, be available for them to be able to reach out to you and help them. But I think it's very important. And there was one more topic that I wanted to kind of circle back to, which Rahul had spoken about, and I think that was about leaders and management themselves actually struggling, and all of that stuff. I think couple of points that I want to make in that space as well. The first one is, I think as a leader, now more than ever, I don't think that our employees are expecting leaders who are supermen or superwomen. I think over a period of time, over the last decade or so, I think people expect leaders to be vulnerable. People respect those leaders who are far more vulnerable, show their human side. So if you have a CEO whose child walks in or has a dog who starts barking in the background, and I'm taking really lame examples right now, but those things also show that you have the same life as me. So I'm not sitting over here from some pedestal and I'm talking to you. And equally in the space of business, right? As a leader, people are okay if the leader comes back and says that, look, I don't have all the answers, can you help me? And specifically when this pandemic hit us, I think all the leaders were the same. I don't think anybody had imagined the scale size of it, had imagined the impact of it, and which is why the leaders who were vulnerable, who were honest, and who were authentic have gained much more respect during this time. And it's the same with corporate leaders, or even if you look at leaders of nations. I believe that that is what has happened. So that was the first point on Rahul's comment, and the second was that I think as a leader, it becomes our responsibility to help people prioritize in times like these. You cannot expect them to deliver everything that they were delivering in the past without having everything that they had in the past. So it is our responsibility to be able to say, what is the one or two most important things that you have to do this year? Forget about everything else that you were doing in the past, so that you are much more focused as an organization, and you're also helping people deliver on aspects which are most important to the organization and are not side tracks. Because all of us know that in corporates, we end up having these 10 points objectives or 20-point objectives, and nobody can do that in a time like this. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been thinking about as I was hearing all of you talk.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you. No, thank you for your comments and your insights. Rahul, there's a question for you that I want to ask. I mean, the questions are coming up, they're lighting up. But there's one question initially, I think for all of us, and let me ask that first, and then we'll come back to you, Rahul. The question is, where is it? There it is. I lost it. Oh, how do you convince employees for a wellness program at work? In my experience, only few employees understand the need for it, or most of them do not. How can you convince all? And I guess my answer to that is you really have to have a buy-in from the CEO. Like I work with senior leaders or the chief HR officer or the direct, I mean, whoever's on top, because if they understand the value that such a program brings, and it's like a ripple effect. You introduce a program like that across the entire organization, maybe the leaders go through it first so they can see the value themselves and get buy-in, and then it starts cascading down. So, those are my thoughts as far as that question. I don't know if anybody has any comments about that. If not, then I'll go to Rahul because there's a specific question for you. And this is the question for you. What are the strategies for manufacturing industries as their employees cannot work from home? They have to come into work. And how do you deal with the COVID-19? And I think this is a safety issue, right? In some ways.
Yeah. So basically, since half of our organization is in a manufacturing side, and we are from the chemical industry, once you shut down a plant, you can't easily start a chemical plant. So it was a very, very challenging time for us. You can't shut down the plant. If you shut it down, it can't start easily because these are all process plants. So we had to, even in the peak of the pandemic, ensure that people were coming. So I think it was, like you said, Dr. Elia, a big safety thing. And we actually spent a huge amount of time putting all the safety protocols in place, putting the standard operating procedures. That's the way, things. The best thing about plants is you have to set the thing, and then it, like a discipline, people have to follow the social distancing norms. We made sure that the canteens were properly done. Initially, yes, we were having rotational shifts. We even tried not only 8-hour shift, but 12-hour shifts. Wherever the law, you could bend, move around, be flexible around it to make sure that people would be safe. And at the same time, not only safety into the plant, but also more importantly, which were the hospitals close by, just in case somebody would get infected, where can they go to? This whole thing, the works of it in a proper standard operating procedures was the way in which we cracked. And today, I'll say it with a sense of pride that the HR team actually made sure that everything was put in place, and the cases from 130 on, kind of came down to about 10 active cases today. So
Thank you for your answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, the reason I raised my hand was a question that I had, Dr. Elia, for you, which is, in the pandemic, we are seeing, the good people really displaying the goodness to a very different level. And the worst part, the toxicity, also displaying it to a different level. Now, in a company where companies run for making, you need to make the business run. And sometimes you'll typically find the toxic leaders are the ones who are actually delivering the numbers. And in a kind of a pandemic situation, it's a very, kind of a conflicting situation for the HR head here. I mean, how do you deal with the toxic behavior, especially in times like this, which you also see in the organizations, not just hunky-dory and everything is, people are all warm and empathetic. It's not true.
No, it's a great question. And the truth is, like, when people are stressed, look, choice is the most important thing that we have in life. We all have the choice. Like I said, what happens, we also have the choice of our attitude. Like, one of the 7 keys to navigating crisis is having a positive attitude. I can't control what others are doing. I can only control what I think. Will I come from a grateful heart that I have a job, or that I have, if I'm a leader, that I have employees that are working really hard in the midst of this pandemic, or will I be toxic towards them? So I think, as an HR leader, if the leader of the company is toxic in the way that they communicate that message, this is what I call, you have to have those really crucial conversations, important conversations, face to face, speak your truth, do it with politeness and kindness by say, sir or ma'am, if you're going to deliver the news in this manner, what do you want the outcome to be? To demoralize and already scared, your employees, or to inspire them? What is your outcome? What do you want? I always play the tape forward, kind of like, if you deliver it in this manner, what do you think the outcome will be? And I have them say, well, I really don't want, if they can't see it, then I'll say it as a leader. I said, if you deliver in this manner, you're going to demoralize an already scared workforce. Is that your goal? Well, no, of course I don't want to do that. But these are the numbers. These are the facts. Okay, but there's a way to communicate with empathy and understanding, and get them to buy in. This is what I said. Yes, we have to hit the numbers, but the way you communicate that is really much more important than actually hitting the numbers. Because if the workforce is scared, if the workforce is stressed and overwhelmed, are you going to really get the best productivity out of them? The answer is no. Of course you're not. So you have to come with empathy and understanding. Still speak the truth. I'm not saying that we should. A lot of times leaders are not very transparent, in my experience. We need to be transparent and tell them, this is where we're at. We had to shut down for 2 months. We're way behind. I really don't want to let go of any employees. I need your help. That's why I'm asking you to work extra hard, because I want all of us, we're all a family. We have to be honest, but to me, we communicate with love, kindness, and respect. I know those are soft skills, but they're more important now than ever before. So we have to communicate that way in order to get the results that we desire, right? Because I'm all for profitability. I understand that every company needs to make money in order to survive. I get that. But you have to communicate it that way. I don't know if that answered your question. Monica, there's a question for you specifically. And it says, the objective to open door culture policy is to encourage open questions, complaints, suggestions, communication, feedback, and discussion about any concerns. But still, most of the people hesitate and criticize a lot of the things that are happening around instead of being straight. So what's your advice to them? And this is true. People will complain, but they won't come in. That's a great question, actually. So Monica, your time is yours.
Sure. You said, you already answered it for me, saying that it's your choice to do what you want to do. You can't control what others are doing. You can only control what you can do. So I think as an HR person, you stand for the open door culture. You allow people to talk, come to you with open heart. As I said, across the nationalities that I've worked, the human relation, the human touch, the emotion remains same. I'm not going to focus much on people that criticize. I'm going to focus on what I'm going to do positively in the environment, keep doing the good work, and let them see eventually. It's very difficult to, as Rahul said, what to do with people who are toxic in nature around. I think the best thing is just to leave them, keep doing your work, focusing on what you can do best in your ability to bring the change in the company, then focus on others' behavior, because I really can't control on people complaining, right? I can only complain. I can only control on how I can leverage the best from my environment and provide the best, I think, services to them. And I always believe that you can be the best of the HR professional from the university, but if you lose that human touch, so as HR professional, I think we always have to stand for the people, with the people, helping them with the empathy in mind. That's my word to go, and always be there for people. And I think eventually those who come along that journey and see you work in that manner, understand you and get along with your ways of understanding that what you're doing is in the benefit of the organization. So that's my answer to people complaining.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. We have another question for all the panelists, and this is a fantastic question coming from Coach Khan. And this is the question for all of you. How are you as HR leaders preparing your organizational leaders to be more effective in the new environment? Wow, that's a big question. Again, how are you as HR leaders preparing your organizational leaders to be more effective in this environment? So
I just have one point to make here. Sensitization for me is the key. I think sensitize them to what happens around the world, make them understand how many cases. We're not growing down in numbers. We're still growing up, right? Even in India, as you said, like US, we're growing day by day. Dubai was growing as well. It had reached from 300 to today 1,500 a day. Likewise in India. So I think sensitizing them to understand the reality, focus more on people's concern, and maybe a little less on the operations for the next few months as the situation stabilizes. And once it stabilizes, we can talk of the numbers more than the human people. I think right now the need is sensitizing and making sure that people are okay, which is the need of the hour for me. Bhavya,
thank you. And I'd like to hear from the other panelists. Bhavya, would you go next? How would you answer that question?
Sure. I think, from my perspective, I think lots of things that one can do as an HR person to support your leaders in leading in this time. The first one of which, and we've discussed this already, is communication. I think you have to help them with platforms, with forums that you can create for them for being able to connect with people, whether it's virtual town halls, where in small groups or large groups, right? But you have to over communicate and you have to encourage them to do that. And why I'm saying this as my number one point is because you have a variety of leaders. Obviously, there are very, charming, charismatic leaders who themselves like to talk to people. But you also have the other side of leaders who actually actively do not like, as a personal preference, to reach out to people. But as an HR partner, I think it's your job to ensure that you make your leaders much more visible in a time like this. So that's the first thing. I think the second is, and which is also what we've spoken about earlier, is that you've got to encourage the leaders to be authentic at times like these. And what do I mean by authentic? Now, you may not be able to tell people 100% of the things, but whatever it is that you can communicate with the people, you should be honest about communicating that. And I don't think that at a time like this, you should make false promises to people of saying that, okay, everybody's jobs are safe, or we're not going to cut, your salaries at all, if you're not going to do it. Of course, if you're going to do that, by all means, you should go and say that. But if you know, and as a leader, you always know where you're headed, right? If you don't know that, be authentic and, give messages in a balanced format. I would say, do not, go out there and say things which you may not be able to stand true to later on, because people will never trust you again. That's the second thing, which is be authentic. The third one is where I think more than the leader, you have to help the organization is around building resilience. And, obviously we can talk about resilience as a trait which is innate in people, etc. But if you look around the world and, personally at PepsiCo as well, we worked on this, there are ways in which you can work on building resilience, as a capability, both in individuals as well as in larger organizations. And I think that's very, very critical, not just for the current pandemic, because you don't know what's going to hit you tomorrow, because of the economic uncertainties, etc. And I think that's a capability organizations need to build. And lastly, I would say prioritization, which is again something that we speak about. I think we have to have those honest conversations with our leaders to tell them that not everything is going to get achieved. So pick out your battles and say what are the one or two things that you want from the people, and then get everybody to rally around that. Don't give people 10 goals and they're never going to be able to do it in a time like these. So those would be, the top four things I think I mentioned from me. Thanks, Dr. Elia.
No, thank you very much. And the one statement that I want to make, and by the way, Coach Khan is the co-author of 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. So he's my partner, my best friend, my brother. One of the things because resilience is a big thing, and we talked about in our message, and the idea of being flexible and adaptable. And we talked about that before we came on the air. We like to use the analogy of the oak tree and the palm tree. Now, the oak tree is this massive, huge tree, right? I mean, it's huge. It's been around for 100 years. It's tall and strong and immovable. And however, when the storm comes, and in your case, a cyclone, and for us would be a hurricane, but it's the same thing. And there's enough rain, enough saturation, and then enough wind. Guess what happens to the oak tree? It comes crashing down on people, cars, homes, and destroys stuff, even though it's been around for 100 years. The palm tree, on the other hand, at the peak of the cyclone, at the peak of the storm, it bends and bends.
Yeah.
Sometimes it bends and waves back. Sometimes it bends parallel to the ground. But guess what happens when the cyclone passes? The palm tree rises up again. And I'm talking about the storms of life now, not just the physical storm, but the storms of life, or even the storms of an organization or a team. It rises up again and survives and actually thrives, because its roots have to be you can go farther down in order to be able to hold on at the peak of the storm. So we're asking organizations and people to be more like a palm tree and less than an oak tree. The oak tree is like, well, that's the way we've done things around here for 100 years. I'm not changing now. Well, no, you have to change and be adaptable and flexible and be a palm tree. Otherwise, you're going to crack and you're going to break. We don't want our employees to break. We don't want our teams or divisions to break. We want them to thrive. And is it possible to thrive during the pandemic? Yes. There's some organizations that are making more money now than they've ever made before.
Yeah.
So it's doable. Rahul, please speak up. I see you shaking your head and you're like going thumbs up. So go ahead. Tell us your thoughts.
No, I really like the example of the palm tree and the oak tree, Dr. Elia. Very nice. That was a good piece of wisdom. And I would say today, preparing the leaders themselves, sir, there are multiple ways. It's not just one way in which you're preparing leaders. And HR should not be just, you're kind of sermonizing and preaching people. I think it's very important. The business leaders are going through their own struggles and insecurities of being able to meet the business results on one side. So you need to understand and empathize on that part. So if costs are a very, very important element for them, then make sure that as an HR leader, you are also walking that path, and to be able to convince them. At the same time, on the other side, since they are vulnerable, I am also seeing a lot of listening coming in for these kind of things. Earlier, when we used to want to start wellness programs or do yoga in the organization, people used to have 10 questions. Now, just go ahead and do it. Everybody's just, lapping up these things. You want to organize a talk on wellness, or you want to organize a talk on good food, good eating habits. I mean, people are now takers for these kind of things. So I think it's a very interesting time where, leaders also who used to see only a cerebral way of working, and they themselves are going through the fear of the pandemic. There's a huge fear that the leaders are being hit. So I publish a COVID dashboard to all my leaders on a daily basis. What's really happening, if someone is unwell, this, that. That also creates a little bit of a fear factor, which is also good, for leaders to, come and start listening to you. So you kind of use multiple strategies to be able to, get the leadership to start looking at things that they've not looked.
And I want to say that, we kind of created with Coach Khan, we created a personal health assessment that looks at individuals. It's a simple assessment. It takes probably like 3 or 4 minutes for somebody to take. It's 20 questions, and they're broken down, your physical health, your emotional health, your mental health, and your spiritual health. What the data you receive from that is of great value, and you can give that to all your employees. And really, before we begin to navigate a crisis, let's find out. It's almost like going to the doctor and getting a physical. Like every year you go to the doctor, you get a physical, see how your health is doing. How are we doing in the midst of this pandemic? What might surprise you is you might say, you know what? I think physically I'm doing good, but I'm really struggling emotionally and mentally. Or maybe I am mentally strong, but I've gained 15 pounds or kilos or whatever, because I'm working from home and the refrigerator is my best friend, So because all of these things impact our happiness. So it's almost like taking a picture of, and I would say for leaders to do it for themselves, take this assessment and find out how we're really doing, and then give it to all our employees. It doesn't cost anything. I mean, we'll be happy to share it with you. And then once you figure out what the pain points are, then you can say, okay, Dr. Elia or the Happiness Center or the HR organization, how can we help that specific area? Because now we've identified, 75% of our employees maybe are physically healthy, but they're struggling mentally, or maybe it's the other way around, or spiritually, or whatever. So we can target it versus giving some kind of generic happiness program, and hoping that it sticks to the wall. Let's find out, take that assessment and find out how people are doing, and then address the issues. I don't know what our time is, and how much time do we have left? Because I missed track. This conversation has been going so great. I don't know how much more time we have. Can Rohit or Abhinav, give us an idea of where we are? And is there another question?
We are 13 minutes over the time limit, so I think we should now sum it up. And I totally agree that it was a very interesting discussion going on. So I think now we can sum up, right?
I mean, I personally wanted to say a big thank you to all three of you for being on stage with me and sharing your insights, your wisdom, your experience, and mostly your compassion, because that's what I felt from all three of you. Like, it comes across like you're not just saying these things because they sound nice. You're saying them because you believe them, and you recognize that we're living in a very different time in this world. So we need to up our own game as leaders. So thank you for your time. And BI Executive Search, thank you for having me on as well.